So my last area was Iguanambi, and I served there for 5 weeks only, because you couldn't spend, the rule was you couldn't spend your last transfer in the zone that I was in because it was so far away from the mission office. And you had to do interviews and the last dinner with president. And so I got moved to the city, and I was training, and we opened up an area again. We pink washed it again. And I remember there were so many miracles in those 5 weeks. Like, so many stories. Like, we got there, and I'd had a couple of rough transfers because, like, the first time I trained, I'd also become senior. We having, like, it was 2 sisters under the age of 21 because of the age change, and, like, I was starting to get sick. Like, I picked up a bacteria, and so, like, all of that, and then I just didn't know what to do. And so they were really good transfers. I learned a lot, but, like, they were also a bit of a struggle for me. And so when I got to the city, I was like, Heavenly Father, I just want to work. Like, I just want to have a good companion. Like, we just want to work. I know it's going to be difficult, but I would really like to just work and have at least one baptism while I'm here. And I remember walking in to get my companion, sweet little Sister Miles. She was so excited. And I walked in and I was just like, this is going to be an awesome transfer. The Spirit was just like, this is like, who's going to work really hard. And so she was so great. And we just, like, we made our goals for the transfer, and we sat down and we prayed about them and we talked about them. We didn't really have an area book to work with. Like, it had been updated, but not for about 6 months. And the elders, like, we took over an office elders area, so they had actually taken it to the office with them. So for, like, the first week, we didn't have one. And so we just got to go out, and we had a map and we had a lunch calendar. And the first night, a member from the other area who lived across, because we lived out of our area, so a member from across the street, she took us to our ward building, like, introduced us to some people, and then we're just like, okay, we're just gonna work. And so for, like, that first week or so, we just walked around and we made contacts, and, like, it was just really good to, because in the zone that I was in before, like, they taught us all these things about, like, focusing on men and families, and, like, how to make families strong in the gospel. And so we were able to apply that in our last area. And I remember, we had 2 baptisms before I left, and I still count the last one as mine because one more person got baptized the Sunday that I came home. So it was, like, my very first week at home, and I was like, he's still my baptism. And so many good memories. But, like, I remember one time my companion, I was trying to teach her how to be bold in making contacts, and there was this lady on the side of the road. And people in the city are a little bit more freaked out if, like, random strangers go up and talk to them, understandably so. We lived in a more dangerous part of the city where, like, it was pretty common for people to, like, just ride by on a motorcycle and, like, grab your bag or something. And so they would always tell us, like, sisters, you can't be out after dark. It's not safe. We're like, well, it's kind of our job. Like, Heavenly Fathers will protect us. Like, we're okay. We'll be okay. We're not going to do anything stupid. And I remember we had to cross the street to go contact this lady, and we were walking, and all of a sudden this car came up, so we had to run. So we got there really super fast, and she looked at us funny. I was like, sister, go make the contact. And she's like, no, you make it and I'll follow. And I was like, no, this is all you. Like, I will support you. And so she goes up, she's like, excuse me. And the lady just kind of looks at her and walks a little bit faster. And I was like, oh, okay, go sister, try again. Like, don't give up. And she was like, excuse me. And the lady just looks and starts, like, booking it down the street. And I'm like, okay, this isn't gonna go well. And in my mind, I knew I should have stopped, but I was like, no, sister, go try one more time. And so she's like, she might kill me for telling this story, but she's, like, running down the street with her Book of Mormon in one hand and her missionary scriptures in the other. She's like, wait, stop, excuse me. I'm just like, sister, no, stop. You don't have to chase them down the street. It's okay. But it was so much fun. But we saw a ton of miracles when we got there. The ward wasn't very receptive to missionaries. Because missionary work in that area had been difficult. And I don't blame the missionaries before for not having, like, what the ward saw as a lot of success. Because it was a pretty hard area. Most of the, like, 3/4 of the people we met, half to 3/4 lived in a different area of the city. So, like, even though you'd make all these contacts, like, we had to send it to other missionaries. And so I remember our very first lady got baptized. We were walking down the street, and she was sitting on the side of the road crying. And the Spirit wasn't like, oh, you should stop and talk to her, like, she's going to be a convert. we were just like, we walked past her, like, we should just go see if she's okay. Like, just see what happens, see what's wrong. And she, her name is Louisa, and she explained to us that like, her son had left the night before and he'd been gone all night, and she didn't know, like, where he was or if he'd been killed, because there was a lot of gang activity in the city. And she's just like, I'm like at my wit's end. I don't know what happened. And we're like, okay, well, like, we explained a little bit. We're like, we're missionaries. Like, we'd like to pray for him if that's okay. And she's like, yeah, that's totally fine. And so we asked her for her address. We're like, we'll stop back by in a couple of days and we'll see how you do. We'll see how things turn out. And so we go home and, like, we pray for him, and we come back in a couple of days. And he turned up safe and sound. Like, he had just been out riding a skateboard with his friends. He was just a normal, like, 16-year-old boy. Didn't tell his mom where he was going. And so we started talking to them a little bit more. And she'd actually taken the missionary, like, discussions in Minas Gerais, a different state where she had lived, down in southern Brazil. And oh, she was so good. I love her. I remember we invited her to church. She's like, I have to work on Sunday morning, but I'll go to work. Because she took care of an old man. She's like, I'll give him his bath, and then I'll come home and change, and I'll go to church. Which was pretty significant because she lived here. The church was over here, and her work was right here. So she was going to walk to work, back home, and then to church. And that took us about 40 minutes to walk to church from where we lived. And so I remember that first, like, we had worked so hard that first week. And I was so excited to see people at church. And we get to church on Sunday. My companion is just like, sister, nobody's here. Like, nobody we invited came to church. And, like, my heart just sank. I was like, well, sister, like, we can teach them and we can invite them, but they have to act for themselves. And, like, she said okay, but I could tell, like, she was really broken up. Because in the MTC, like, I love the MTC, and they're like, yeah, you're going to have people, like, people come to church all the time. But it's different for every mission. And so every Sunday you might not have investigators at church, or people might not get baptized every single week. Like, in Brazil, we had a lot of, like, people baptized sometimes every single week in a transfer. But a lot of times it didn't work out like that. And so she was just at that point, she's like, oh my gosh, like, all of this hard work, and we really have nothing to show for it right now. And I was just like, it's okay, sister, like, we're just gonna work. Like, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go, we're gonna work, we're gonna do our best, and Heavenly Father's gonna take care of it. And sacrament meeting was just starting, and for it to count for people to come to church, they have to be in sacrament meeting. And I was so grateful that it was last. And we're sitting down, and we just gotten past that point. Like, we just had that conversation. She's like, okay, and she's so bummed. And Louisa comes walking in the door, and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm like, sister, she came. And so, like, we're, like, trying to be very quiet in the background. And maybe it was Sunday school, but she showed up before sacrament, like the actual ordinance. And so the word mission leader goes up and says hi to her. And, like, and we take her into the bathroom, and we're just like, Louisa, what happened? She's like, I'm so sorry I was late. I couldn't find the church. Like, I asked people and they didn't know where it was. And, like, we could give them, like, buildings that were near it, but it was in a house. And so there was just a little sign on the wall outside. She's like, I couldn't find it. I'm really sorry. I'm so late. I wanted to be here. And, like, she was so apologetic. And we looked down at her foot, and she was bleeding. And we're like, oh my gosh, Louisa, like, are you okay? What happened? And she's like, yeah, well, I cut my foot walking to church, and I was almost going to go home, but I had this dream, like, last night when I was sleeping, she's like, I had this dream, and the voice just kept telling me that I had to get up. I had somewhere to be. She's like, no, I'm going to sleep. And the voice was just like, no, like, you have somewhere to be. You need to be there. And so she got up and she went to work, and she went home, and she changed, and she'd stepped on this piece of glass probably halfway through her walk. And she still walked around for maybe half an hour trying to find the church. And, like, she came, and after that Sunday, like, after church, she was just like, I've never felt so much love in any church. Like, I'm gonna cry. Like, she's like, I've never felt the way that I do when I feel when I'm in that church. And I'm like, okay. And, we were a little more tactful. We were like, well, like, that's the Spirit telling you, like, because this is true. Like, we were telling her all this stuff. And, like, every Sunday she came to church after that, and we would stop and we would, like, teach her. And she had 3 kids. She had a rough life. Like, her husband cheated on her and left her, and, like, she was left to raise these 3 kids, and she was probably the poorest convert I have. Like, we walked into her apartment, and it was just, like, a very small, like, maybe, like, just the area where I am in, like, a sitting room. And then they had a bed and a hammock hung across one part, and then you walked in and it was the kitchen and then it's the bathroom. That was all they had. It was probably a little bit bigger than this room. But everything we taught her, she was like, okay. She was like, Felipe, she was just like, I feel that like this is true. She's like, I'm gonna pray about it, but I already know that it's true. And so we taught her so many just simple things, and she would say, you know, I'm gonna do it. Or like we would teach her about tithing, and they did not have very much money at all, but she's like, I'm ready to pay my tithing. Like, I just got paid, show me how to do it. And when we taught her about the law of chastity, she's like, okay, I'm gonna live it. Like, I'm gonna do it. And when we taught her about the word of wisdom, she's like, okay, I don't have to drink coffee, it's fine. And it was just like so easy for her. And she said, she's like, you know, if I was in any other place, like if I was in Minas, where I was before, like I don't think I was ready when those other missionaries came to teach me. But like everything you guys are telling me, I know that it's true and I'm gonna do it. And then eventually her daughter got baptized, and then her son got baptized. And then like all of our converts lived on the same street in that area. And so the next one was like just a few blocks down, and he had taken the lessons before in a different state, and he just never had the time to get baptized because he was a trucker, so he was always gone. And so like we went to teach him. He's like, oh yeah, I know it's true. And like he would invite his friends to activities and to come to church with him, and he was pretty much a member anyway. And then the last one lived just like 3 doors down from him, and they were good buddies. And he was more interesting because he had a lot more issues. He was an alcoholic. We thought, when we contacted him, we thought he was with his daughter, which wouldn't have made a difference. We would have said hi anyway. But like we were able to talk to him a little bit about the plan of salvation. We're like, oh, how would you like to be with her forever? And he's like, oh, well, this is my niece. And like throughout the course of teaching him, he was so good. But they have this alcohol in Brazil called cachaça, and I call it the moonshine of Brazil. And it messes you up. And he was like, had a really big problem with this. And so I remember we had a lesson about the word of wisdom with him. And then later that night we went to schedule an appointment with his neighbor just a few doors down. And he's like, hey, Francisco's at the corner, like barbecue drinking. And we're like, oh my gosh, no. Like we had such a good lesson, and he was so adamant that he was going to stop. And we know that people have like, they fall back. But we were just like, the same day? And so we went to go talk to him and see what was up. And I don't even know about him. He said, he's like, you know, I give up. It's too hard. I'm not going to do it. Because he would go run errands for the owner of the place, and he would give him alcohol in return. And so he was just like, I'm not going to do it. We're like, Francisco, we're not giving up on you. My companion was playing the good missionary because she just got out of the MTC. And I was at the point, I was like, okay, this is how it needs to be. Like, this is what you need to do in order to reach your goal. Like, I was just so tired of people like leading us on. And I think it was a really good combo because he was just like, no, I'm not going to do it. And my companion's over there, she's like, no, Francisco, like, we believe in you. You can do it. Like, Heavenly Father loves you. Like, he's not going to give up on you. And I'm just like, Francisco, stop being stupid. Like, you have such like potential and you're throwing it away. And so like we were just doing this back and forth, and at one point we got into an fight, and I'm just like, okay, buddy. He's like, you can't make me do it. And being the stubborn missionary was, I pointed my name tag. I was like, you see this? It means that we're representatives of Christ here on the earth, and it means that we can do whatever he's given us power to do. So it's like, whatever we want to do. And he's like, but you still can't make me. And I was like, watch me. So I walked over to the owner. I was like, you're not allowed to give him any more alcohol. And he's like, oh, okay, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, no more. Like, I don't care what errands he runs for you. Like, he can't have any more. He's trying to stop. And he's like, okay. He's kind of like, oh, just leave. You're kind of like ruining my business. Cause like, they're not used to women being so like outspoken. And so I go back to my companion and to Francisco, and they were like 10 feet away the whole time. He's like, there, you don't get any more alcohol. And he's like, I can't believe you just did that. And I was like, really? Really? And he was just like, after this whole thing happened, he was like, I'm so mad at you. You hurt my feelings. I was like, well, Francisco, you let us down too. And after that, he was just like, oh. But like the whole time, he was just like, I can't believe you did that. And he was like, just like going off. And I don't remember what he said, but I remember feeling very strongly the Spirit saying, you need to dump his alcohol out. And I was like, I don't have a death wish. I don't want to die, because it was like very few women and just like all these old men on the street. I'm like, no, I don't have a death wish. And so I ignored it, which is, something you should never do as a missionary. And then like he kept talking, and I just kept feeling very strongly the Spirit was like, you need to dump it out. And I'm like, I am not going to die in my last 3 weeks in the mission. Like, I've survived this long. And like going through my head too was like, what are my companions' parents going to think of me? Because earlier in the transfer, like our very first night, we had gotten coffee and cigarettes from somebody who wanted to stop smoking and drinking coffee. And she was so excited to write home about that. I'm like, gosh, what is she going to tell her parents about me now? And so like the whole time I just feel like, and it was one of the only times in my mission where I can remember very clearly like words, not an impression, like it was words. It was like, dump it out. And so I was just like, oh, okay. I'm going to do it. And like he had a cup, and then he had the bottle, and I poured the alcohol into the cup, and I left about that much in the bottle. And I was just like, Francisco, you're going to have to forgive me for this. And I turned and I threw it on the street, and like you could just hear this gasp. Like the whole entire street turned and looked at us, and I was like, I set it down and I was like, tell me you're not going to drink anymore. And we walked away, and I was just like, sister, why did you let me do something so stupid? And we were talking about it, and we didn't know it was going to come of it. And Francisco got baptized 3 or 4 weeks later. It was so cool. But it was just, there were so many miracles. The people in that city, part of the city, were so ready. And I remember being really grateful to like have been put there at that time to help in those miracles, because ever since that first Sunday that Louisa came to church, like the ward completely turned around, and they wanted to help us with everything, and they were asking who they could go visit, and they gave Louisa clothes and like clothes to wear to church, and they would go visit our investigators, or like when we had activities, they would like take them under their wing and go do things with them, and they wanted to be a part of it. And so it was really cool to see that turnaround and to see how much the members wanted their ward to grow. It was amazing. So good.